Our third speaker this evening is Michele Smith. And Michele, we want to thank you for making the trip up today from Victoria. A bit of Michele's bio. Michele is an advanced certified trauma and resilience practitioner. She has her master's in the field of complex trauma and 24 years experience with survivors of the traumatic death of a loved one. Tell me you haven't had your hands full in the last year or two. Yeah, I bet. She's in private practice and the founder and president of Aaron's Society, focusing on trauma. Michele also informs schools, works with groups and children, and provides training for professionals. Tonight, Michele will be sharing about the current mental health practices, parental alienation caused by government, safe supply drugs for minors, transgender ideology in schools, and the current prescribing of mental health drugs. Can we put our hands together and welcome Michele to the platform?
Thank you so much. Actually, can I put this?
Oh, absolutely.
First of all, thank you also very much for asking me. Is this?
Closer to the mic.
Okay. Okay.
Here's professional. Thanks, Brian.
I'm short. Is this any better? Is it good?
See your notes.
Good. Okay, everybody here? Awesome, awesome, good, thanks. Trauma, what an extensive subject. It is actually, it's very extensive, and there isn't time tonight to be able to condense everything into 15 minutes, especially when it comes to symptomology, treatment of it, and so on. I can tell you in our culture, it's an incredibly overused word, and for most people. And so what people, because of that, what people generally think it is, it probably isn't. And, but it does have devastating, and is having devastating effects on our society, our culture, and current bills, legislation, and ideologies are in direct conflict to healing our communities. This is a problem, a big problem. So it is necessary for a real quick breakdown or a definition of trauma experience in order to set a basis for what I'll be speaking about. Trauma is an experience or life event that is a threat to one's own safety or the safety of a loved one. It can be a perceived threat. But it's one in which the victim can't run, they can't fight, and so it leaves the victim feeling helpless. When the event occurs, the cognitive thinking part of the brain goes offline and can't be accessed. So this isn't going through the thinking part of the brain, the rational part of the brain. It's stopping at the fear center, the midbrain. And it's igniting the nervous system in a fight or flight response, and if it can't go full cycle, that response is stuck there. And it doesn't go away just because the threat does. It's stuck. So it starts to manipulate the victim's life. It leaves the victim with a real shattered sense of safety, feelings of helplessness, and a system that's what we call switched on and constantly scanning for danger, is constantly hypervigilant, trying to ward off whatever is coming at them next. These responses are not voluntary. They go underneath the cognitive awareness. Usually for the victim. So you've probably heard of things like a fight response, flight response, those types of things. That isn't just somebody getting mad. A fight response, for example, that can be extremely violent. And even if it is non-violent, it's going to be assaultive. Because that person is going to lose their cognitive ability to think. You are going to get a very nasty response if you trigger a fight response. So these responses are not usually thought out or cognitive. Symptoms, there's such a wide range of symptoms: depression, emotional dysregulation, extreme physical pain, often diagnosed as fibromyalgia, self-harm behaviors, inability to move forward, drug addiction. I'm going to repeat that. Drug addiction is a trauma symptom. Suicidal ideation, reenactment, dissociation, isolation, and a whole lot more. So one doesn't need to have all the symptoms to be suffering from trauma. They only need to have some. Everybody's different. Some people are very high functioning but find themselves constantly appeasing others, particularly authority figures, or sidestepping or avoiding anything that may remind them of the trauma, so it can manipulate even those that are high functioning. In children, it is the most missed and misdiagnosed issue there is. The symptoms are endless. It can cause what we call learning disabilities, sleeplessness, hypervigilance, acting out, ADHD symptoms, attachment problems, gender dysphoria. In my textbooks, gender dysphoria is a trauma symptom. Just so you all know. Kids tend to grow out of that. And so much more. Now, during COVID, I saw kids bedwetting, reduced to baby talk, parents waking up and finding their 7 or 8-year-old sleeping at the base of their bed. I had a 17-year-old sitting across from me so frozen solid with fear, he couldn't move anything except his thumbs. Parents didn't know what was wrong. They tried everything from discipline to everything else. And they said, he's frozen with fear. And so I had to attempt to get this 17-year-old out of a frozen state. But that frozen state will actually keep the victim from moving forward in any way. I can't get my schoolwork done. I can't have a shower. I can't move forward. My goals are destroyed. And on we go. So it's not just the physical so I saw a lot, and it didn't stop. We're still seeing it because the trauma didn't stop there. So these are still things that we're dealing with with kids, and in particular hypervigilance. Now, trauma's only been in the foreground of study for roughly about 20 years, so you're not seeing a lot of people who specialize in it. And you can't just take a course in it, and believe you're good to go. I mean, trauma, I think the only full degree course is about 4 years long, and it's on campus. That's how extensive it is. So you're not, it's a very extensive subject matter. The problem with trauma is that once that reflex is stuck in the nervous system, it doesn't go away because the threat does. It stays stuck. It manipulates the victim's life. You are seeing it all around you, and you just probably haven't identified it for what it is. We've seen people at rallies literally screaming in each other's faces. I mean, I saw a gentleman jump over the dividers and punch a cop in the side of the head. We're talking major fight responses when you trigger people. COVID was a threat to safety. I can't run, I can't fight, I'm helpless. Fear, stuck in the nervous system. We had an explosion of what was termed mental health issues. If a person has been previously traumatized even as far back as childhood, which most people have had some sort of experience with trauma. If a person has been previously traumatized and another trauma comes along, it doesn't have to be the same trauma, it only has to make you feel the same. I can't run, I can't fight, I'm helpless, bang, off goes that response. It triggers a trauma response immediately. So again, it doesn't have to be the same trauma. So a lot of what we're seeing and have been seeing is actually old trauma. It's not even new. I mean, some of it's new, but a lot of it is actually old. Anybody who knew anything about trauma actually are calling it a trauma tsunami. So even police officers I talked to were calling it that. They've had enough PTSD courses to know what it was. But many are also saying that our current approaches to mental health have been and are a colossal failure. They need to be revamped. It's horrible. You cannot chemicalize or medicate a trauma response that's stuck in the nervous system. You can't. You may be able to treat some of the symptoms, maybe, but that trauma is still there. You're not going to take it away with a pill, so we are not hitting any part of this with a chemical approach to treating trauma. Now, that doesn't mean if anybody's on meds, you should come off it. That's dangerous. Don't do that, not unless you're under a doctor's care. But I'm telling you, if it's trauma, which it's a lot of the basis of what we're seeing, it's not going to be medicalized away in that way. Now, educators had regularly told me that before COVID, they maybe saw one transgender, if any, in a whole school. After COVID, at least one per classroom. Yeah, what does that tell you? Now, I had phoned a school counselor to give the results of some screening I'd done on a 12-year-old, and I mentioned her by name, and I was told she doesn't call herself that anymore. The counselor told me she doesn't have any choice but to call her what this girl wants. I said, well, I won't be calling her that. I liked that kid. I'm going to be calling her what I know her as. So I asked the counselor if she was aware that we have a name for that kind of behavior. It's usually referred to as dissociative identity disorder. It's a trauma symptom, and that she was reinforcing it. Yeah. You're reinforcing trauma stuff. She said, I was singing to the choir. She didn't have any choice. Right now, I'm looking at a lot of teachers suffering from trauma and jumping ship, and there isn't, and nurses as well, and there isn't a lineup waiting for the positions to be filled. One counselor told me the other day, I am sick to death of pulling our middle school kids off the floor from their drug use, off the hallway floors. When sex education was introduced to school, they said parents aren't doing their jobs. We always get handed these great one-liners, like parents aren't doing their jobs. Or how about we need to keep people safe from counselors. That's another really good one that's coming up. But this one, parents aren't doing their jobs, so we need to help the problem with teenage pregnancy. Well, that soon escalated to condoms in the washroom, and you can visit the nurse for the pill, and you have to tell your parents. There it started. We know where it's evolved from there. So getting in between parents and children is parental alienation, something that is incredibly frowned down upon if it was a custody battle or divorce battles, even to the point that it could cost someone their children. It causes trauma in families, in children, as parents feel the control of their children being torn from them, and the child can grow up with any of the trauma symptoms, including drug addiction, and may even alienate from their own children later in life. Are educators psychologists? Are they experts in child sexuality? And if you knew where this type of curriculum actually originated from, you'd be shocked. When raw sexual material is given to children without moral context, it often just becomes a how-to manual. So suddenly we had this explosion in STDs in children between 10 and 14 years of age, which is an indicator of promiscuity in kids as young as 9. The second we brought this kind of sex education into schools, because there was it was out of context completely. This is off topic, but just so you know, if you want to look it up, our IQs in developed countries have been substantially dropping. Some say since the 1970s, some say since the Cold War. I think it's since the Cold War. If you look it up, you'll find everybody has a different reason why our IQs are dropping. I have my own theory on it, but our IQs are dropping. Although maids for mature minors has been taken off the table, it wasn't taken off because of public outcry. It was taken off because they couldn't get enough doctors on board. So it's important to note that the cognitive part of the brain, the frontal lobe, this is really important, folks, really important. The cognitive part of the brain, the frontal lobe, the part that reasons, problem solves, looks at long-term consequences, it's where our empathy lies, philosophizes, where we come to conclusions. It does not fully develop until someone is 25 years old. Yeah, look it up. That's the average. 23 for girls, about 26 for boys, yeah. So average of 25. So the term mature minor is a deception. I don't care how mature that kid is, you cannot draw on a resource you don't have. And that brain is not developed, that part of the brain is not developed until they're 25. So the idea that this was even on the table for discussion without parental consent, suicide, whether it's assisted or not, will cause the most extensive trauma you've ever seen, usually affecting somewhere between 7 to 10 people. What do we do then? Euthanize them all under the umbrella of incurable mental illness? Is that what we're planning on doing? Interesting that Canada has the highest rate of organ transplants from maids. Okay? Yeah, Highest rate of anywhere, right here in this. And guess what? The BC government has been applauding this. Look, this is not something I think should be celebrated. We ought to be investigating this. You know, it's terrible. Safe supply drugs. Wow, that was genius. Firstly, Purdue Pharma had to admit to being a direct cause of the opioid crisis and was charged with 3 felony charges. How is it possible for our government are now offering this for free to minors? Again, without parental consent, standing between parents and kids again. So it appears the pharmaceutical industry and anyone who benefits financially from them are not going to let a good crisis go to waste, no matter which way we slice it. So we have already noted that self-medicating drug addiction, alcohol abuse can be a symptom of trauma. So we traumatize an entire population of people, including our young, with COVID and then offer them free drugs. What could possibly go wrong, folks? And we use deceptive terms like safe supply. Wow. So is it a surprise that our overdoses have climbed by over 400% since 2019? Who's coming up with these ideas? It's astounding. I think actually who's ever coming up with these ideas, this is a good indication that our IQs have dropped, folks. So, have any of the people mandating this ever talked to an addict? Doubtful. Are they drug and alcohol addiction counselors? No. They were warned beforehand that these drugs would wind up being sold or traded to organized crime for stronger drugs, and they would wind up in the hands of our youth. It appears that no one in this country wants to stay in their own lane of experience. And all are alienating parents from children and causing trauma. The very people who are mandating these dangerous policies are the same people who are preparing under B36 to take control of the counseling industry. Clinical counseling mostly are boots-on-the-ground people, using buzz statements like protecting people from counselors. May God help us all. I guess I haven't quite figured out that it isn't the counselors we need protection from. But if you can see that, these are the kinds of things that they're mandating, you can get a picture of why it is so deeply disturbing that these are the same people that are going to be controlling the counseling industry. Like it's horrifying for me. A look at history, you'll find that we have been systemically traumatized since the Cold War. There's been Y2K, acid rain, threats of war, terrorism, H1N1, 9/11, climate change, HIV, COVID, and a whole lot more. But with COVID, they eliminated everything that could be healing: access to doctors, support systems, family, and most of all, they shredded communities. Can you imagine that a population of people who are driven by fear, constantly scanning for danger, and cannot detect safety, the kind of power someone will have if they wave a carrot of safety and said, "This will keep you safe"? They will, they're going to head for that, even if that carrot's hanging over a cliff. Anyone who gets in the way of a traumatized person and their perceived safety is likely to get a real ugly response. Someone knows everything there is to know about behavioral control through trauma, or they don't know a darn thing at all. I'm going to let you come to your own conclusions, because this is a blueprint for it, folks. Trauma does not go through the cognitive part of the brain. So talk counseling hasn't proven very effective. Psychotropic drugging does not kill trauma reflex in the nervous system. Don't come off drugs if you're on them, please. There are many approaches a trauma practitioner will use to help bring trauma full cycle. Solid community is one of them, actually. It can be a safe place for those suffering from trauma, emotionally regulating and grounding, and it can provide a sense of belonging, meaning, and purpose. It gets almost impossible to heal from individual trauma when communities are in shreds. I wonder if somebody knew that when they shredded our communities. So with some final thoughts, make your community strong, stand together with a common vision. I had a beautiful young black lady tell me one time that it isn't the racist remarks that come her way in public. Beautiful girl. She said it's all the people that are sitting around that heard it and did nothing to help. Don't leave Dr. Malthouse or Adam or anybody else standing out there alone and not finding you behind them. One person can't do this. These are community efforts. You have a great deal of power to change. You just and what you will or you will not accept in your communities. Even you have to pressure for bylaws, and you have to be a bit uncomfortable for a while. You're going to have to decide if there's anything worth saving in our systems right now, or whether you need to create your own. That's up to you. But I will tell you, you threw me off with this. Okay. But I will tell you this. We were raised up as Canadians in Arctic trapping, log rolling, and barroom brawls. Don't forget who you are and don't lose your backbone now. You're Canadian. Let's go.
Thank you, Michelle. Cuts close to the bone. We're going to hand up cards right now for any of those of you who have questions. Does anyone have questions? That means we're going to get a card to you. We would like you to fill that out immediately.